Hi, and welcome back to JTZ923 on your radio. Now, today marks a pretty tragic day in the English world. This is the 12th anniversary of the death of Mr. Artie Spiegelman, the famous graphic novelist for the book Mouse. Um, Now, a few years back, we had an interview with Mr. Spiegelman, and I want you just to hear and listen to his responses. Kind of listen in to what you think he's trying to convey across with his responses and the emotion behind his responses. So, I'm going to play that for you now. So, here. Welcome, everybody, and today we have a very special guest in studio. We have on the phone Mr. Artie Spiegelman, and we have an interview planned out with him today, but he doesn't have much time. So, we're going to get through this and get going really fast here, okay? So, um, my first question for you, Mr. Spiegelman, is what inspired you to write the book Mouse?
As a young boy, I grew up hearing some of my father's stories about the Holocaust. He told me about his struggles and how he had to work hard to keep him and others alive.
Yeah, I can only imagine what he must have had to go through. Um, Next question, how often did you come and see your father, or did this change when you began planning your book? What kind of made you want to see him more?
I occasionally came and seen my father, but not as much as I wanted to due to ongoing events in my life. But this drastically changed when I began writing the book. I needed the information, the stories, and every factual detail there was, so I began visiting quite frequently.
That's very interesting. Next question. Did your father enjoy telling these stories, or did you feel more like you had to force it out of him? Like, did you feel like he enjoyed his time spending with you and telling you these stories?
Yes and no. There were some stories that he tried to stray away from, and you had to force it out of him. But I think he more enjoyed me being there with him. He doesn't get much company, only Mala, and Lord knows him and Mala did not get along well at all.
Well, I'm glad you started spending time with him. Next question is, um, what emotions were you experiencing while listening to your father's stories about his experiences in the war?
I was mostly experiencing feelings of guilt and sadness. His stories really pull out any emotions you have held back. They bring a realization to how bad times were during the Holocaust.
Yeah, like I said, you can only imagine what they went through during the Holocaust. Um, my next question would be, what emotions did you feel from your father? Like, what vibes were you coming off of him? Um, what, how do you think he felt while he was telling his stories?
I felt that my father was experiencing a lot of pain, like reminiscing to the terrible times he went through. It seemed like he had a hard time telling some stories, but stayed strong and pushed through like he did when he was held captive.
No, interesting. Next question is, did hearing these stories change your life in any way, or did it change your view of your father in any way? Did you become closer by chance, or what?
The stories didn't change my life, but they gave me a better understanding of what my mother and father went through and why my father is the way he is today. They showed me how great tragedy and torturous events can change a person. Vladek is the way he is today because it's basically how he lived during the time of the war. He lived with nothing, so he had to learn to survive with what he had and not to waste anything, and to stay as fit as possible.
Makes sense. I mean, you can only imagine how long they went with food in their pockets and stuff like that. Final question would be, what story or stories did you like the most? Which grabbed your attention? You know, maybe thought brought some kind of emotion to your mind, or made you really, really pay attention to them?
The story of his time in Auschwitz really grabbed my attention. It's very interesting to hear what all happened to him while he was held captive. It amazes me that he even survived, because he was put through the ringer. They made him work his tail off for very little, but even when he worked how hard they wanted him to, they hit him and beat him like he was some kind of animal. It really brings a realization on how bad the Holocaust truly was.
Well, that's very interesting. But well, I appreciate you spending some time with us today on the phone and giving us a call. And
It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
it's been a pleasure speaking with you too. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Artie Spiegelman, once again the famous writer of the book Mouse. Thank you. Welcome back. What you just heard once again was an interview with Mr. Artie Spiegelman, the famous author of the book Mouse. Now, if you're ever looking for a great book to read, I recommend Mouse 100%. It's a book about the Holocaust through Artie's father's eyes, and it goes through his whole entire life event of being in the Holocaust, going through Auschwitz, what led up to the war, what happened during the war, and a little bit afterwards. And it just shows you the perspective of what other people view survivors of the Holocaust and how they view them. So, once again, if you're ever looking for a book to read, I would recommend, highly recommend the book Mouse by Mr. Artie Spiegelman. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. And remember, don't change that dial. You're listening to JTZ923 on your radio.